Our next guest speaker, the immediate past mayor of the great city of Stamford, our Democratic convention nominee from 4 years ago, and there's a good chance he could be your next governor, Dan Malloy.
Hey. Let me say this: Denise Merrill is an outstanding human being, and would certainly be a Secretary of State that we could be proud of. And I've enjoyed working with her and getting to know her. And I didn't actually understand until I read her piece of paper over there that she was a classical pianist. So I think that's what we need the Secretary of State for, classical pianist. So I think I would run on that if I was you. But it's great to be with you, and you're doing God's work up in the legislature, fighting for the principles that we believe in. And so I want to acknowledge you and your candidacy and wish you good luck and Godspeed. It's great to be back in Danbury. I know so many of you. I've worked with some of you, Mayor. Let's get another Democratic mayor in Danbury, please. Gary certainly spent time going door to door with in the fall, and certainly worked with your legislative delegation as well. So it's great to be back here once again. There were a couple of references to the picnic. I happen to like the Danbury picnic. I want to go on record. Probably some of the best food of any of the picnics around. But
you know, like 5 in a row now.
I think I have. I get an award or something like that. But it's great to be here. So let me do a couple of things. I want to make sure you know who I am, what I'm trying to do, and maybe why I'll be successful at it, and convey to you what it is that is at the essence of my campaign. First of all, we need to select a Democratic candidate who can win this election. I happen to agree with Denise that this is the opportunity of a lifetime. We have an open seat for governor. This governor decided not to run. Quite frankly, has not done a good job, and the state is in such a situation where we're looking at a $6 billion potential deficit in the out years of the budget. It's going to take a Herculean effort on the part of leadership. That begins with the governor's office. We need a candidate who, quite frankly, we as Democrats can put forward, have on the stage and debate issues with Republicans. We know what Republicans are going to say about Democrats. They're going to say we're tax and spend, that we don't know how to run anything, that we're not good at anything, and that all we want to do is dig in further and further into people's pockets. So we need a candidate who can withstand that sort of barrage. I've been a mayor for 14 years. In a city that has the second largest Republican Party in the state of Connecticut. And over a 14-year period of time, we lowered crime by 63%, making Stamford one of the 10 safest cities in America 8 years in a row. In a state where we've not created any new jobs. In fact, we only have 97.2% of the jobs we had in 1989. In that state, Stamford grew jobs, including this year adding 2,400 jobs to a new building that was constructed in the last few years of my mayoralty. In a state that hasn't invested in replacing affordable housing and making sure that working people can live close to the place that they can find a job. We built thousands of units of housing, and we require that 10% of all new multifamily housing be set aside as affordable, something that I'm very proud of. Quite frankly, we did that about 8 years ago, and not a community in the state has yet to replicate what we've done. We've added over 400 units of housing as a result of that requirement. And we're looking at thousands of units being built in the not-too-distant future as a result of that requirement. And this isn't the old project-type housing. This is mixed housing. This is where, really well-to-do people live next to somebody who's got a bit of a subsidy, and everybody lives together. In a state where urban areas have really taken it on the chin, I think over the last 14 years, if you asked people what they thought of what we accomplished in the city of Stamford, they would tell you we did a lot. And we did it while we maintained a AAA bond rating, and that our increases in taxes were less than the inflation rate over that 14-year period of time. Now, if you put me on a stage with any Republican, Foley or Fideli, who I went to high school with, or one of the folks who's talking about getting into the race, The first time they say tax and spend Democrat, I'm going to say stop right there. Because you're right, I would spend money on infrastructure. I would make sure we had highways that met our needs, that we invested in other forms of transportation. I would make sure that we had infrastructure that we could be proud of, because that would be the basis of our economic growth, just as I did in the city of Stamford. But having run a $500 million corporation, a city that grew 14,000 people while I was mayor, I'm prepared to take my record, Mr. Republican or Miss Republican, and put it up against yours any day of the week. See, we as Democrats can actually get things done. So we need a candidate who has a voice to stand on that stage. We need a candidate who has a vision of what the future could be. Now, you know, when I tell you the story about Connecticut only having 97.2% of the jobs, this is as of the 2008 National Labor Statistics. There were only 2 states in this nation that had fewer jobs than they had in 1989. We had 97.2. Michigan had 97.3. They actually beat us. And if you think about what happened in the auto industry over that period of time, they actually had good economic development. We had really bad economic development. There were only 2 states that hadn't gained a job, and we were one of them. And by the way, the rest of the states, the other 48 states, shared millions of new jobs when we didn't grow a city. I have a vision for technology investment. I heard our prior speaker talk about our woeful inadequacy in using technology. Well, we haven't made the kinds of investments in technology. This Republican administration and her predecessor wouldn't allow us to do it. We should be able to transact most business we do over the internet. There shouldn't be a requirement to show up at some state office to renew your license or do something else that you could otherwise do over the internet. Other states are doing it. And by the way, if we moved in that direction, we would be cutting the red tape that is so burdensome on small businesses in this state. I have a vision for a different way to fund education. You know, we cannot be proud in the state of Connecticut that we are more reliant on property taxes than any other state in the nation to pay for education. That cannot be a high point for us. The reality is we don't share other revenue sources. We don't allow communities to decide how they're going to raise their money. I don't know whether it's true anymore, but as of 2007, you had a number of hotel rooms in town. 21 hotel rooms actually were, or 21 hotel establishments. Not a single cent of the overnight rate stayed in your community. Go to Massachusetts, some portion stays in the community. You go to New York, some portion stays in the community. Now, by the way, Danbury's sending the ambulance when somebody's sick. Danbury's plowing the streets to make sure people can get in and out of that hotel. Danbury's doing all of the other services, but all of the revenue on the overnight rate goes to the state government. And by the way, our rates on overnight taxation are lower than both Massachusetts and New York. There are other things that other places share with other communities. You know, in most of America, some portion of the income tax is shared directly, or the sales tax is shared directly. Listen, you had $4.25 billion in sales in Danbury in the last reported period of time, and not a single cent of the sales tax revenue stayed in the community in which you provided those services for those establishments as well. Not a single cent of the utility tax stays in the community. These are all things that are replicated in other parts of the country. We're going to have to build a different way to pay for education, particularly for our urban areas, or otherwise you're going to end up with larger and larger classes and, quite frankly, not be able to keep pace with the kind of education that you want to make sure is delivered to the young people in this community. So I have a different vision of what we need to do and can do in this place. So we need a candidate with a voice and a vision and a track record. And I believe that I present all of those abilities. I can tell all of those stories. I can give real evidence of having accomplished something, of having built something, of having improved something, of having run something, a $500 million government. You know, I sometimes say when I talk to other folks that running Stamford over a 14-year period of time, you know, a large city in this state is a little bit like running a small state in New England. I'm ready. I'm trained. And I would consider it the privilege of a lifetime to be able to play some role in making progress in this state, in moving it forward, in taking a state in the middle of a crisis and finding a way through that crisis. There's also another challenge that I would love to be part of. You know, finally it looks like we're going to get some form of renovation and change to the health insurance system in the United States. It's not what I would have preferred, quite frankly. I would have preferred a public option. But in this state, maybe we'll have a public option. Maybe we'll have a governor who signs a pooling bill. I certainly would do that. And open up the way that we buy insurance or health care for our own employees, start opening it up for the not-for-profit industry, and then eventually the small business industries as well. We create our own public option and find a way to lower the cost. And whatever person we elect as the next governor of the state of Connecticut is going to be charged with implementing those kinds of programs out of Washington, being a real partner with the Obama administration to make sure that the health care dream that we as Democrats have, that everyone will have access to good health care, actually takes place in this state. So when you're actually deciding who you're going to support at this convention, when you're actually making a choice, maybe you want to consider the fact that when it comes to pooling, a number of years ago when I discovered how expensive the drug benefit was for our employees and we're self-insured, I went out and created a pool to have the drug benefit purchased. And by the way, Danbury participated in that pool initially. That started with 13 communities. It's now up to 63 communities. A pool that the city of Stamford under my leadership started. So I'm ready for those kinds of challenges. I've dealt with that kind of issues that lie before us. And I'm not discouraged at all. In fact, I have to tell you, the idea of wrestling with a government, making improvements, making long-term investments in the future, improving education, changing how we pay our bills, supporting and working with local governments, I would consider that a high honor and privilege, and I am ready to do it. And with that, I'd like to take questions if I can. I will warn you, if there's no questions, I'm just going to give another speech. So, you might want to ask one or two.
Guys, questions? One thing I can say before Dan gives his next speech. Two things. Number one, Dan Malloy was here going door to door this fall with Gary on more than one occasion, number one. And number two, you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who worked harder for every vote he got out of the Danbury delegation in 2006. Trust me. No one worked harder than Dan did, getting every vote he could squeeze out. In an election that came down to 4 votes, every vote mattered.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the support that I had in this community, and whatever happens in my future in politics, I'll never forget the kindness that was extended to me by the people and the delegates of Danbury in the last convention. Listen, these things are not easy. I got to be the first to acknowledge. You know, anytime I walk into a room, the first question I ask is anyone here running for governor? Because every day there's somebody else running for governor. And there are people you know and people you've had relationships with. I understand that this is tough business. I'm not asking you to vote for me because you know me better than somebody else or I've been here more often. I just say, at some point you all have to ask yourselves, close your eyes and say, which of these candidates would can win is one thing. But there's probably a couple of us who could win. Which one of these people would do the job? Understand that right now our distinguished representatives who are here, as well as the candidate for Secretary of State, they're wrestling with something that could grow to be $1 billion deficit in the current fiscal year. In fact, I'll predict it's going to be $1 billion because I don't believe the governors, they have something called lapses. The governor is supposed to assign $470 million in lapses. I don't think those are going to materialize, or most of them will materialize. So I think you're going to be looking at $1 billion. And probably something equal to that. And then the next governor is looking at a structural deficit that's going to have to be handled. And handled directly, not the way that this governor does. So what I would say to you is, close your eyes and say, okay, let's make sure we choose a candidate who can win, and then let's make sure we choose a candidate who can govern. And I think that's really the rationale for my campaign, is that I've actually done this job for about 14 years. I see your last Democratic mayor. We've done this together. We've worked in the fields. We've run government. And being a mayor is a lot like being governor of a small New England state. So I'm really enthused about it, and I do think we have this tremendous opportunity. And I don't know what the final field will be. Some people we had this unbelievable thing happen last week where a great Democratic senator who made a choice to stand down, and Dick Blumenthal immediately announced that he would run, and I don't know whether you saw the initial polls. He's already at 60% approval, or 60% rates of votes, and now there are people who are trying to make judgments about what they're running for. Listen, I'm ready for this one. I'd like to have the opportunity to do it. And I see Felix back there. Is he bad? We were making him sit back there? Yeah. Okay. But it's great to be with you. I really want to thank you for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. I also want to say what a privilege it was to serve with Gene in his years as mayor. Did a great job and was a distinguished mayor. I also want to say, Gary, it was a true privilege to get to know Gary. He came to my office early on in the cycle, and we developed a friendship, and I developed an appreciation for his goodness and decency, his sincerity, his intelligence, and I was very proud to go door to door with him and to be asked to do that. And I've always been proud to work with people in Danbury any occasion I get. So I want to thank you for that high honor and privilege as well.
Yeah, I just want to say that I want to acknowledge how much help he was to my campaign, both with advice, both with putting his skin in the game, knocking doors, being at fundraisers, being at our picnic. And I can tell the other candidates who are here tonight that ran with me that Dan did an awful lot for our party. And I'm very appreciative of Dan, and I support Dan in his run for governor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.